Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar, How to Start 2021 FMCSA Strong. This webinar is designed to show your team how to take care of your annual FMCSA requirements quickly and easily. So we're going to show you how to complete all of your limited queries, your annual MVR processes, and everything else that FMCSA wants you to do, while also providing you with a good way to put best practices into place so that you're really in a good position when you start 2021. So this is our second time running this webinar, and if you attended in November, welcome back. You'll find that we've changed this one up a bit just to allow a lot more time for demonstration. So really quickly here before we get going, just know that this webinar will be recorded. We're going to send you a copy of the recording to the email address that you registered with for the webinar, and it'll come to you in the next 24 hours. So you will get a recording. If you have to, drop off for any reason, don't worry about it. It will come to you, and you can watch it at your convenience. If you have any questions during the webinar, please do not hesitate to ask them. Just let us know by typing them into your GoToWebinar questions panel, and we'll try to address those as we go. But if we don't get to them as we go, we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. And if we don't get to them then we will reach out to you afterwards. So we really want to get your questions answered. It's really important to us that that it's clear how you do this and how we make this easier. So also we have 3 handouts here that will help along the way. They are under the handouts section, and we'll tell you a little bit more about these as we get to them, but it's probably a good idea for you to try to grab them now so you don't forget. Okay, Josh. Alrighty, so my name is Leah Kelly. I'm here with Shannon Wheeler, our general counsel, and Josh McAllister. He's our 10th Street Solutions consultant who's going to lead us through the demo. And we'll get to the agenda next. So our demonstration agenda, the way this is going to work is that Shannon's going to talk you through all these requirements and what they mean, and then Josh is going to show you immediately right after she's finished how to use 10th Street's tools to make meeting these requirements really painless and easy. So we'll start with the annual clearinghouse requirements, and then we'll move to the annual MVR and qualifications checks, gathering COVs and reviewing medical exams and certifications. And then we'll go to annual training and corporate maintenance. Those are both kind of best practices and policies that you can put into place to get you in a position to start 2021 strong. And then the next slide is where I'll let Shannon take it over.
Thank you, Leah, and hello, everyone. This is Shannon Wheeler. I am the General Counsel here at 10th Street. And if you have joined my compliance webinars before, I always start with this legal disclaimer, which is that the following information, the information on this webinar, is offered for educational information only and is not legal advice. As always, we recommend you consult with qualified legal counsel on all of the issues, laws, and regulations that we talk about. If you would like a reference to a qualified attorney that can represent you or your company, feel free to shoot over an email to your account manager, and I will get you that recommendation. And of course, we disclaim any warranties associated with this presentation. So in moving on to the next slide, we are going to talk about the clearinghouse, and I think it's really fitting. We started off the year 2020 talking about clearinghouse. Of course, we were talking about pre-employment queries and what needed to happen to hire someone with the new processes and requirements under the regulations for the clearinghouse. And now, of course, we're ending 2020 talking about the clearinghouse. It's been a long haul. We've been talking about clearinghouse for a long time. But of course, now we're going to talk about the annual requirement, the annual limited query requirement. So Josh, if you would switch to the next slide. So you might be asking yourself, what is the annual requirement? What does this apply to? It applies to all of your CDL drivers. This is a really important key. When we started in January of this year, you had to pull a full query for your newly hired drivers. But the annual query is going to cover all of your drivers, even if they were hired prior to January 6th of 2020. And you have to get that annual query on file by January 6th of 2021. So I actually noticed there's a bit of an error in this slide. It says by January 6, 2020. That should be 2021. So you have to run that limited query by that date. Of course, as we know, as we've talked about many times, the Clearinghouse has had technical difficulties. They had technical difficulties at the beginning of the year with the volume of people and queries that were being run through the system. And if everyone waits till January 5th of 2021 to run their annual queries, it's possible that you're going to have problems with meeting that requirement because the Clearinghouse might not be able to handle the capacity. So I highly encourage you to run those now. So one thing to also keep in mind on this annual requirement is that if you hired a bunch of guys a bunch of drivers, and you went through and had an orientation on January 6th of 2020, you also have to get the annual limited query for those drivers. And so you need to have an annual query, really a result from the annual limited query on file showing the driver is not prohibited a year from when you ran the full query. So this really applies to two different things that you need to do for the limited queries. You need to run it on all your CDL drivers hired prior to January 6, 2020. And then if you hired people at the beginning of the year in 2020, you're probably going to want to do those limited queries now to go ahead and get those out of the way, because you have to have them at least 1 year before the full query expires, or the pre-employment query expires. So you might be asking, what is a limited query? It's a check of the Clearinghouse to see if violation information has been reported to the Clearinghouse on that driver. You can run them in bulk, and it literally is just is there information or not? If there's not violation information, you will get a status back of driver not prohibited, and then that driver is cleared to continue to drive for you for 1 year. This is the key part. If there is violation information, the Clearinghouse will return a result of records found. They won't tell you what actually was found. They will just tell you that something is found. And then a full query is required. And so if you use 10 Streets for your Clearinghouse TPA, and as Josh is going to demonstrate, we will if there's a results found, a records found result, we will automatically run that full query on your behalf, but you have to get that full query result back within 24 hours, or you cannot allow that driver to continue to drive. So what it means if there is records found is that there is likely been a violation information reported to the Clearinghouse, and that driver is prohibited from driving. And so I have placed in the handout section the Clearinghouse monthly report for October of 2020. They don't yet have November's released, although I'm hoping that they will have it out soon. And I can tell you that there have been almost 46,000 violations reported. If you pull up that handout, you will be able to see that there's been a grand total of 45,991 violations reported. So there's a lot of drivers out there with violations. And some amount of those drivers have probably done the return to duty process, but the majority have not. The overwhelming majority have not. I think the numbers say it's around 4,000 that have done the return to duty process. So if you currently employ one of those drivers and you have not done a Clearinghouse check, you wouldn't know unless you ran this limited query and found out that there was information available. So it's really key that you do this and that you go run your limited queries. And then if you get a notification, if you use 10 Street as your TPA, you'll get a notification. And if you get a notification that says that records were found, best practice is go get that driver out of a truck immediately so that you can find out what really is in their record and not have them behind the wheel. Okay, Josh, if you would switch to the next slide. So you might be asking, well, what kind of consent, or do I need consent for the limited query? The answer is yes. But you can obtain that query outside of the clearinghouse. So as you know, the full query consent, the driver has to go into the clearinghouse and consent to the clearinghouse. For the limited query, you can get a written consent outside of the clearinghouse. What you want, we've also placed in the handouts a sample of limited query consent. And if you want, you can adopt that language. The key here is that you want to get that consent signed at the beginning of the employment relationship so that you have that on file, or the contract, so that you have it on file for the driver during and throughout the time that they are with you. So you also want the written consent to say during employment or during the contract period. And then if you have a bunch of drivers that you need to get the limited query on, but they were hired prior to this requirement or prior before you got that implemented on, like say your application and your releases, we have the ability to send the limited query consent out in bulk, and that's something that Josh is going to show you all here in just a few minutes. One of the other key things to remember is that you need to maintain the limited query consent on file for 3 years. And then you also need to maintain the record of the queries for up to 3 years. That's actually written into the regulations, is to maintain these records for 3 years. Okay, and then the last thing, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought I was going to go ahead and sneak a question in there.
Sure, go ahead.
So somebody's asking, and this is a great question, can you run the limited annual query more than one time per year?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I'm very glad you asked that. And I was about to mention it. It is a wonderful best practice to absolutely run that limited query more than once a year, because as I noted earlier, you might not know, you will not know if a driver has had a violation unless you run that limited query. So I would highly recommend running them multiple times throughout the year. Of course, there's costs associated with that, both from the clearinghouse end and if you use 10th Street from 10th Street's end, but it is a minimal price to pay to find out that one of your drivers maybe went somewhere else and took a pre-employment test, or somehow had a violation reported in some way that never got reported to you. The way the clearinghouse works is the clearinghouse will, you can run a full pre-employment clearinghouse query, and then you will get notified, but if there are any updates, but only within the first 30 days after the full query. So then for the remaining 11 months of the year, unless you run a limited query, you won't know if that driver is cleared unless you run it. So running it more than once a year, as you can see on this slide, it is highly, highly recommended. That way you can pick out and find if there are any drivers that are having violations reported. Some of the other best practices are, these are complicated and new regulations. And so really try to dig in, educate yourself on what is required for the clearinghouse. We've gotten calls with a lot of confusion about the clearinghouse. Of course, I mean, it's new, it's not easy to understand. There's 2 different queries that have to be run. It's all through this new database. There's 2 different types of consents. I mean, it is very, very complicated. But I really would encourage you to attend webinars like this, which I'm very happy to see so many people joining us today. And then you can also go back and see other webinars that we've done. And then the Clearinghouse has a really great learning center or page that you can check out with FAQs and things along those lines. So I really encourage you to understand the requirements, and then train your team, train your recruiters, train your processors on what the Clearinghouse is. Keep them up to date on these things as well. Not lastly, but I also encourage you to have an actual written policy on clearinghouse queries, and include in that policy that if you want queries to be run more than once a year, you know, if you do it twice a year or if you do it every quarter, include that in the policy, and then use some sort of monitoring tool to monitor your compliance, to make sure that before drivers are placed in trucks, they all have a full query. Before, the year is up from the full query that you've run the limited queries. So use tools and like reporting tools like what we have available, which Josh is also going to demo, to show you how you are complying with the clearinghouse and how you stack up, so that people don't slip through the cracks. And then the last thing I want to talk about on best practices is the adverse action letter. So yes, if you are disqualifying a driver based on a clearinghouse report, so there's a result that is returned, you need to send out an adverse action letter to comply with the regulations. They actually require that you give notice to the driver. You can pull him from the truck. You absolutely need to pull the driver from the truck, but then you do need to give notice through an adverse action letter and give them time to dispute it if it is not correct or accurate. So I'm sure we will have more questions on that, and I'm happy to take them. But from here, I think we're going to switch to Josh and let him demo our clearinghouse product.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shannon. I want to go ahead before we hop into it today and just talk through some best practices to go ahead and make this a little bit easier on you. I know 2020 has been a year of excitement and chaos and all kinds of fun things, and I would love to give you a little gift here and make this easier. We can do this together. So feel free to follow along with your 10th Street account. Go ahead and get these run. We'll avoid all the chaos that happened with the clearinghouse crashing last year, hopefully. So first off, though, if you haven't imported your drivers, shoot an email over to your account manager, to your advisor now, and say, hey, I want to do a driver import. That is going to make your life easier. We want to get all your currently hired drivers in the system. That way you can use these bulk features. You'll also notice in the handout that we do have what's called express subject import. That is the template that you'll need to copy their data in and provide that as well. So download that, put the data in. Let's make sure the drivers are imported. I also want to mention that if you're not connected to an MVR vendor that we partner with, again, reach out, let us know. If you're currently using Assurant, HireRight, IIX, Samba Safety, or Supervision, eSupervision, we work with all those vendors. There's not going to be a charge on our end to link that up. So reach out to your advisor and account manager, let us know. I promise it'll make your life easier here. We're going to go ahead and start here by looking at the bulk ordering on those limited queries. So if you can see my screen here, I'm showing you first through the Safety Management or Enhanced DQF tool. You'll be able to click on this Clearinghouse tab. If you haven't found that yet, you'll be able to go Tools and then see Safety Management. That is where that Clearinghouse bulk order resides. And so we'll click on that. You're able to come in here and you're going to see I've got my filters pulled up. If you're someone that has work lists set up, go ahead and select the work lists that are applicable to you, and then choose your driver status. Obviously, we only want to run this on hired employees. So we'll go ahead and choose hired, and then you can see over here, we're looking at this to see, do we have a limited query on file? Do we have a consent on file? And it's going to report on those variables as well. So we'll go ahead and click refresh, and you'll scroll down and see the tool itself. My list of hired drivers are over here. If you're a company that has multiple DOTs, it's going to default, but you are able to toggle that if it's a number that driver does drive underneath. Most importantly, on the right here, we're actually going to be able to show you, do I have a valid license on file? That's going to be essential to run this. You're going to be able to see if it's expired or if it's missing or if it's compliant. We'll also be able to see if we've gotten written consent from that driver. The mail is showing that we've actually requested that. And then lastly is the query column itself. If we need to get consent from our fleet, it's as simple as saying I want to send that in bulk and then select all in place. That will send the consent out. They'll be able to sign off on that, and then you'll have a consent on file. When you reload this list, you'll see that it's been asked for, and then when it's been completed. At that final step, we can actually say we want to bulk order the limited queries. This will send off for your entire fleet of hired drivers. And as Shannon mentioned, there's a lot of benefits of using 10th Street. All you have to do is assign us as a TPA. If there's questions on that, feel free to reach out to your advisor. We're happy to walk you through assigning that. You can have multiple, which is one thing that's important to note. So some of you may think, I already have a TPA with my MRO. That's fine. We're specifically going to be one that can conduct queries on your behalf. So we'll go ahead and do that, and it sends it off in bulk. If we get a hit on that limited, as Shannon mentioned, we immediately request the full. We're trying to make sure we get that result within 24 hours. And we actually, for full queries, reach out proactively to your drivers as well. which is important to note because they have the option with the Clearinghouse of choosing snail mail or electronic notification. And if they happen to choose snail mail, we're literally going to be waiting on mail to make it to their house, letting them know they need to consent, which is not going to make that 24-hour mark for you. So it's as easy as that. You go to the Clearinghouse tool, you choose select all, and it sends it off. You're also able to do this through the search tool. So you can go into search, we would pull the status of hired drivers, and on the drop-down arrow, you'll see an option for bulk ordering. We'll choose that, and it's going to pull up the same tool. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them right now. We'd love to answer regarding specifically ordering those limited queries.
Okay, I've got a few questions. I'm going to go try to get through some of these. People are very engaged today, and that's great. So just to start, what is the cost to run through 10th Street?
That's a great question. So it's $1.25 to the Clearinghouse. That's part of the legislation that the query has to come from the query plan that you purchase. And it's $3 with 10th Street in addition to that. If, for example, you run a limited query in bulk like this and you were to get a hit and we had to run a full, we are structured just like the Clearinghouse. So we don't bill you that $3 twice.
Okay, great. And so how do you verify a driver is registered in the Clearinghouse?
So the driver is going to, with the limited consent, we get the written authorization, right? So we go ahead and run that. If the driver isn't registered, then that's what's important about us doing an outreach, right? We can't get the result to you until they are in this house, in the Clearinghouse specifically, pardon me, and they consent. And so if they're not, then we will text them, we message them. We actually do that whether they are or whether they're not. But that does let them know that they have to go do that.
And then you can also
just on that. Oh,
go ahead, Shannon.
thank you, Leah. If I could just on that, for the limited queries, a driver does not need to be registered in the system to consent to a limited query because the limited query is obtained outside of the system. The limited query in the Clearinghouse is connected to the SIDList database, and so it matches up with their driver's license number. There can be some issues with that, as I'm sure some of you have experienced, and our 10th Street account managers have tried to help companies in working and dealing with that. But there might be some problems matching up with license numbers and states, but for the most part, a driver should not have any problems based on the SIDList database and their driver's license number running those limited queries. So they do not need to register in the Clearinghouse to run the limited query.
Okay, and isn't there a way also we can see in the dashboard if the driver's registered with the Clearinghouse?
Through the Pulse app, if the driver lets us know that they've registered, then you will see an icon on their file. So for example, if I go to Tara's account here, you'll see the FMCSA icon right here. And that lets you know that she's let us know through Pulse that she is registered.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so for a limited query question, Josh, if you run the mass limited query on, say, like 12/20, does that mean you have to pull the next mass query again by 12/20/21, like December 20th or 2021, or can it be by calendar year?
So as Shannon mentioned, you need to run one within a year from when the last query was run, and that's why this reporting is so beneficial. As a fleet, you guys already have so much to manage to make sure that you're meeting compliance, and so we are able to send out notifications letting you know when that expiration is upcoming, and you can come right back to the tool and order it in bulk for that next go around.
Okay, goody. Thank you very much. We've got a lot of questions. We could keep going, but I'm going to just for respect of our time here, I'm going to let you guys go ahead.
Great, thank you. So again, we appreciate all of your questions because I'm looking at them too, and we will, if we don't answer them on this call, we will definitely get to you after the webinar is over. So. And I know that there are tons of questions over at Clearinghouse because it's definitely been something new to the industry this year. One of the other requirements that you likely have coming up at the end of the year is the annual MVR. And so Josh, if you would switch to the next page just to hit on the regulatory aspect of this. Under 391.25, at least once every 12 months, you have to get an MVR that covers the preceding 12 months. So you want to do this to ensure drivers are not disqualified, to ensure their CDL has not been suspended, revoked, or denied. You also want to make sure that they haven't been convicted of any disqualifying criminal offense, such as a DUI or transportation of unlawful substances, leaving the scene of an accident, a felony involving the use of a commercial motor vehicle, things along those lines. Those are actually required that you do every year. And then what is also required as the annual qualification is that you consider evidence of the FMCSA violations. And so what you might do for that is looking at your CSA scores, looking at the driver's CSA data and information. And then of course, when you're hiring somebody, you pull a PSP, but those are the annual requirements that you will have come up. And that you'll need to start getting done for the end of this year, if that's when you normally run them. Josh, do you want me to run through this next best practice, or do you want to demo the MVR?
Yeah, we can go ahead and look at the MVR really quickly. So
Great.
If you're using our enhanced DQF tool, that's what I've got pulled up here. That is where we do all of our document tracking. It's essentially a tool that does a mock audit for your company of the files that you're tracking. And so we can set up notifications on those file types. That's how we're going to be able to notify you when you've got an upcoming expiration. Those can go internal to you as a company. They can also go directly to your drivers. So documents like CDL, MedCard, physical, that might be something that they provide, they can get a notification without you having to do anything besides setting that up initially. They're going to be able to take a picture of those documents front and back on their phone, which is really convenient. Drivers are on the road, right? So Pulse functions as a mobile office for them to take that picture, send the document back, and you're able to get that on file. That's kind of where we pick up on this bulk MVR ordering, right? We want to make it very, very easy. And when I mentioned linking us with one of those preferred vendors, that would want to be something that's in place to go ahead and do this. Once that's done, you can come in here and under bulk order or annual MVR or under bulk order, either way, and go ahead and pull that list. Now, best practice on this, we really, really encourage you to run these by hire date. I know a lot of people historically have run this once a year because it's not been easy to manage or track. We're taking away those burdens of how do I manage and track who comes up for this. The reason we really encourage you run it by hire date, maybe you hired a driver in November, you've just run an MVR, and you run these annually in January. You're going to run it again when you've just paid to get that report. Likely not much has changed, and then you've got from January all the way till next January that you haven't seen if there's been any updates. And so you could potentially have a driver on the road that has some kind of violation or offense that you're unaware of. And so we really encourage you to do it by hire date. It's as simple as coming in here and saying, hey, I want to run everyone with a date in January or December. I'm going to choose my hired drivers only, all my different work lists, and I'm going to go ahead and run that report. Now, in my demo environment, since I've just run this, I might not have a huge list of drivers. Haley looks like she's the one that's coming up. And so I'll go ahead and say, hey, I want to bulk order her MVR, select all in place. That's going to send the request off to the company. We'll run all those MVRs in bulk and file them individually into that driver's DQ file. What's really, really cool about this tool is that it will also send out the annual review or that certificate of violations directly to the driver's phone. If they don't have our phone app, they can, of course, use the online portal that we have. But when they log into either of those platforms, they're going to see that form ready for them to fill out. And so this COV, specifically the annual review, they're going to click on that. They'll view it just like a PDF. It's going to pull in the data that is redundant that we already have from their Intella app, and they'll be able to fill out the specific violation data. Very, very simple for a driver to complete, directly done on their phone, okay? Once they sign off on this, it goes back into their file. It's actually going to notify you as a company and say, hey, you've got a COV that's been returned. but you have not countersigned it. That is a document that you as a company need to review and countersign. And so if I were to click on that specifically, it's going to take me to Haley's file. I can go to the document section. I will be able to review her COV, see what she filled out, and then countersign my portion. Very simple process. If there's any questions on that, feel free to ask.
Yeah, Josh, so several questions about owner operators, and are the requirements any different? Do they have to do this, the MVR process, the annual review, and do they have to do limited queries too? How do owner operators, how are they affected?
The answer is yes, you do. So the way that, I'll start with the clearinghouse. The way that the clearinghouse works is if the owner operator is operating under your DOT authority, yes, you are going to want to get that clearinghouse on file, just like you were if you were hiring them versus contracting with the owner operator. So the process for an owner operator operating under your DOT authority, again, looks just like if they were being employed by you. You need to run a full query prior to putting them into one of your trucks under your DOT, and then you would also need to run an annual limited. For owner operators who operate under their own DOT authority, they have to have a TPA, and they need to be a part of a consortium, and essentially they need to run queries on themselves and any other drivers that work for them. And then if you are contracting with them and but they're operating under their own DOT authority, you are likely, it's going to be a good practice to get evidence of the queries that they have run on those drivers, because you could still experience some liability if, say, that they had a driver that was operating while they were prohibited. So if you're strictly owner operators where they have their own business, their own authority, they have their own responsibilities for getting that clearinghouse query taken care of through a consortium or a TPA. They do still need to comply with the pre-employment and the annual to get those done and have them on file in the same way that an employer-employee relationship is. For what was the other question for the annual MVR?
Yes.
It's really the same. If they're operating under your DOT authority, you have to get that MVR every year. And for really, it's the same answer as the clearinghouse queries. Even if they are operating under their own authority, but you're contracting with them, you're going to want to get evidence that they have run that annual MVR.
Okay. What about people who work for the company that hold CDLs, but they don't drive full time? They could drive at any given time, but they don't really, they might not drive at all. So are they required to run the limited query on those people as well?
That's a great question. The regulations talk in terms of employment. So they and so if you hire them or contract with them, and they at the beginning of the relationship, and they start driving for you, you of course need to have that pre-employment full query on file prior to them driving for you. If they are still considered to be driving for you, like it's a period of service that is ongoing, then yes, you would need to get that annual. If the period of service has ended, then no, you would not get the annual query, because that period of service or their employment relationship or contract relationship would be ended. But if you started another period of service, you would need to get that clearinghouse query, full query, pre-employment done prior to them driving for you for the second period of service.
Okay, thanks. Just to throw this in there before I get to the next question, I see several people who have tried to download the Excel spreadsheet, the Excel spreadsheet, and so thank you guys for doing that. And I believe there's something wrong with it. I am going to send that out after the call. So if you're not able to download that, if that's giving you problems, then my apologies, and don't worry about it. I'll get it out to you afterwards. And then again, I think, I'm not sure if Josh said so, but if you do have the tool, and if you're not following along, maybe you could open your dashboard and follow along with Josh, and I think that might help you see how this works. If you don't have access to the tool though, It just means that you might need to get it from either your primary or you haven't subscribed to the service yet, which you can totally do that and make 10th Street your TPA, and then, we can help you with this whole process. So I just wanted to throw that in before I got those two things in before I got to the next question.
I do throw out that anyone has access to Clearinghouse in bulk. We did offer that as a tool just to add some value and help with this. And so you might need to assign 10th Street as your TPA. And again, the advisors are happy to help you do that. But everyone does have access to order Clearinghouse in bulk.
Okay, good. So I have someone on here who isn't able to access the tool. So I thought that I'd seen that a couple times, but
that was given to the primary user. So if you don't have access to it yourself and you might not be the primary user for your company, we would just want to reach out to that person.
Yeah. Okay, I will let you go ahead and we'll go back to some questions after this.
Great, thank you. So in addition to the Clearinghouse annual requirement and the MVR annual requirement, you also are probably thinking, oh goodness, we have these certificate of violations that we've got to get. So Josh, if you could go to the next slide, I will talk you through that regulation. So it's 391.27. Of course, I'm referring to the FMCSA regulations, and they state that you have to get a certificate of violations every 12 months, and that you have to, it is required that you consider that accident record. Josh is also going to demo the very easy way that you can get certificate of violations through Pulse and through the dashboard so that you can easily gather those. And then, of course, you can send them out in bulk to get as well. And then the other thing that I want to mention, and Josh took it off the slide, but I'll go ahead and mention it because I think he's trying to set up to demo this, is that this is a really good time of year also to review all of your medical certifications and review and see if any drivers need updated medical exams or if their certifications have expired. So every 24 months is for drivers without special considerations, but then drivers that have special considerations might be every 12 months or even sooner if they've got certain medical conditions. And then it's also a really good time of year to review expired or upcoming expirations on licenses. So these are all things that you can do through the dashboard that Josh is going to demo, but things that we wanted to give you a reminder of are also due annually to be done. So Josh, I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. So we did look at certificate of violations and annual review. That goes out when you bulk order the MVR directly to that phone or to the portal. I want to show you within the driver's file, and this may seem to many of you who've used this a long time like, is he really showing us this? I promise you I am, because let me tell you, I know when you're in here, some things become second nature and it gets overlooked. But I want to show you really easy, how do I get a good snapshot of this driver specifically and kind of their performance in terms of documents that are on track? Are those things expired? Maybe you have notifications set up and you're used to that process. But if you go into the driver's file, and I do want to point out, I have turned on our new view. This is something that we're rolling out on the subject view. I think it looks really nice, so you get to see it today. But when you scroll down here in the document section, we are housing DQ files. The ability to store those is offered to everyone through 10th Street when you're having a recruiting package with us, if you're an enterprise client. And so you can store those files in here. It's cloud-based. You guys can access them anywhere, even on a phone. But it makes it so easy to come in here and review. Let's say that I want to look at the past 90 days of my driver's performance. I've got that separated out by category in here. I can see that I keep what's required for an audit in my DQ folder. But to Shannon's last point, you do want to review these things. So maybe it's time to request that document. If you are not requesting those through Pulse, let me tell you guys, you're missing out. It is easy as can be. Drivers love it because you're meeting them where they are, right? They're on the road. And there's over 1 million drivers that have Pulse downloaded and about 150,000 people that are active in this monthly. And so it's very prevalent. It's not a new tool by any means. There's a lot of value for a driver. When you request a document, let's say that their CDL is expired in the system. You can literally say, I need a CDL. and you can say a little message to them, right? Copies needed. And that's going to go as a push notification directly to their phone. They're going to get that ding ding. They take a picture front and back. On their end, it's literally as easy as saying, hey, I've got a notification. My company's requested a document. They choose that to take a picture. It asks for front and back, and they send it in. Once that's complete, they're going to have a document waiting for you in the documents to be filed section. This is really, really important to note. We do not automatically file documents. That can be a risk to your compliance, right? I don't want any of my clients going into an audit thinking they've got a valid CDL and then finding that it's a picture of the driver's dog or somebody else's CDL or something crazy. If you think it, we have probably seen it. And so it's really easy to make sure that that's a valid document. It's going to say yes, you save that and confirm the expiration, and that goes into their file once again for you to review. So the COV goes out with a bulk order MVR. The rest of the documents that Shannon just mentioned for that requirement that we want to check, you should be housing them in here. That's included functionality. You can request those documents through Pulse, and it's very, very easy to then maintain and track that file.
Sorry, I started talking but was still on mute. Okay, so one of the other ways that you really should consider as a trucking company is starting off 2020 really strong is to start conducting annual training if you don't already. And so training is a really important tool. It's a really important tool in the industry. And Josh, if you could go to the next slide, I'll talk about the benefits of having conducting documented driver training. As I'm sure you all have heard, we hear every day, it seems like, in the industry about new nuclear verdicts, and it's causing your insurance rates to go up. It's causing my insurance rates to go up just as a regular driver on the road. It's really affecting so many things. And I believe it was 2 months ago, we just had one of the largest nuclear verdicts that set a new record. And I feel like we keep hearing those, and we're gonna keep hearing those. But if you have and can point to documented training that you are providing to your drivers, then that creates a defense in a case under accident liability, saying we took efforts to train drivers and to train this specific driver who was in this accident based on his history, or on the driver's history. If they, had some sort of incident or heartbreaking event or something along those lines, we can, within 10 Streets training, send out basically what we call an infraction action training. So there's an infraction, and then you act upon that by sending that driver out training. And if you've done that and you take those steps, that plays well to a jury, showing that you take action and you take safety and training seriously in an accident liability case, which could help prevent a nuclear verdict. There's also shown that if you have documented training, that drivers have fewer accidents and incidents. Obviously, it will improve, those things will improve your CSA scores, which I know affect so many things about your business as a trucking company. It also, doing training creates a strong culture of safety. It's also a retention tool, because it's an investment in your drivers. And if your drivers feel like they're adequately trained and that you are investing in them, they might and will likely want to stay longer. Of course, and then there's also transparency. It allows you to have transparency into the driver's performance and history if you're saying, hey, we're going to give you this training for these things. So these are the benefits of documented training. And of course, we have training tools. Josh, if you would go ahead and switch to the next slide, that you can easily send out to your drivers to get them that training that they can watch from their cell phones and through Driver Pulse. So we make it really, really easy, and you can automatically bulk schedule those classes. I specifically asked one of our advisors who has put a lot of heart and soul into these training into the training library and to building these, to send me some training that we currently have as a part of our training library that would be good to do every year. And these are these you can see on the screen, some of the ones that she came up with for drivers: winter driving, adverse weather, CSA overview, avoiding animal collision, speed management. These are things that are great right now to start with. If you don't already do driver training, if you do already do driver training, go ahead and bulk schedule some regular annual training. And then in addition to training your drivers, it's also key to train your employees and your safety managers and those that work in-house. They need to know things too that these drivers need to know, like hours of service, CSA, defensive driving, driver empathy, cybersecurity. But you can also do training like workplace violence, workplace harassment, things along those lines that all employers do with all of their employees. And then you can also encourage through Driver Pulse self-initiated driver training. And then one of the things I think Josh is going to talk about is that we have a CSA infraction action. So if there is a CSA change or a CSA violation or something that comes through, if you use our CSA tool, we can have it automated and set up to where that will automatically assign a particular driver training to that driver who had that infraction under the CSA. And same with like your driver management software. We can integrate and give company specific training based on the things that are through your driver management platform. And with that, I am also going to turn this back over to Josh to let him demo some of these things.
Yeah, thanks. I'm passionate about the training content, guys. It was designed in-house. Marilyn Serber has really spearheaded this with her team. She's one of the CVTA members of the year. We have really developed and designed this for drivers. If you have a training vendor, I would really encourage you to at least take a look at this. It is very different than what's out there in the market. So I'm going to show you through Pulse what a driver would see when you schedule training with us. Again, everything we have at 10th Street, it is geared and designed on a mobile first platform. And so a driver would come if you schedule courses and interact with those directly through their phone. If you have drivers that do not have the smartphone app or don't have a smartphone, they can certainly use the portal account to access that as well. It's also important to note we don't have logins, right? So it's very easy for them to use their information to access that. When they move through a training course, our courses on average are 6 to 7 minutes. They are broken up. It was very, very specifically designed with a driver in mind. A lot of times we hear complaints that they're a video-based training course and the company usually says, I feel like they just push play, walk away, and then take the quiz at the end. And there's not really any assurance for me that they're actually engaging with the content or getting any behavior modification from that. From a driver's perspective, maybe I have a short break before I have to take my next shift and I want to do part of my training. If I don't complete that in full, then it's a waste of my time. I got to start back at the beginning when I go back to it. This is designed differently. The driver can take the course, it's broken up in sections, and about every 90 seconds, we ask them a quiz question. The content itself, it was designed to be interactive, so there are audio clips. Drivers preferred this method because they can still listen to it, but it takes less streaming data on their phone. There are interactive diagrams that they have to move through, and that gives companies a little bit of assurance that the drivers are engaging. And then flashcards, every course is a little bit different. This is, again, designed to have that engagement. What I think is really, really cool about this training library, right? It's got 120 videos. It's going to have everything that you need. Reach out to your advisor. We can probably, likely be very competitive in cost as well. We don't do some of the per view models that are out there that usually cause some heartache for companies. But more importantly, we have married that training library with our new CSA integration. We've talked several times today about some of the nuclear verdicts that we're seeing. They're a threat, they're happening. It just is what it is in the industry right now, and we want to protect the company. When you put together the tools that we're looking at, this is like a safety manager stream. They get to go to bed at night knowing that they've got everything at their fingertips, they've got an ironclad safety culture, there's automations in place to take away the risk of human error. I mean, it couldn't work well any better together. And so the CSA integration actually is a direct integration to the FMCSA. It checks for violations on a daily basis, so you don't have the scenario where a driver could maybe not disclose something to you. You're able to come in here, you can see trending data based off what's going to fall off, what's coming. Obviously, you can move into the details and charting on that. But as you move through your basics, you'll see, where do I sit in terms of threshold percentage? How am I trending over time? And then I can see specific granular violation data. I can also move through and see some charting and event detailed graph information that maybe my management and leadership wants to see as well. But it's so easy to really funnel down to, hey, what are my common violations? Maybe I want to send a training course out in bulk to my fleet. Who are my top offenders? Maybe this driver is doing me more harm than good to both my insurance rates, my ISS scores, my CSA totals. Who's getting my clean inspections, and what do I need to dispute? But most importantly, it automates that training for every single violation that's received. And that's the best line of defense that we can give you against reptile theory and these nuclear verdicts. If you're not familiar with reptile theory, it's the approach the plaintiffs are taking to actually go into a company, look at your processes and say, hey, there's a systemic failure at this company. They don't consistently train, they don't consistently monitor, their policies and their actions don't line up. And that's where those nuclear verdicts can often come from. And so this tool is saying, hey, these are the recent violations, these are the recent crashes, this is what is unmatched, but here is what 10th Street is doing on your behalf. We send out a course for every violation. It's pre-mapped to over 692 specific violations. You all can customize this. If you've got proprietary company-specific content, that can go out as well. But it's the idea that it's happening in the background, it happens without fail, and that's the ironclad culture that you need to protect you all from reptile theory. What's even cooler, and then I'll stop rambling because I know I'm that sales rep, but what's even cooler is that we can link up with your telematics. So if you've got truck cams or ELDs that monitor driver performance, Keep Trucking, Lytics, some of those companies, we integrate with them. If there's a harsh cornering or an overspeed or a hard braking event, we can set up the same consistent automation that would send the course out, enroll the driver in coaching, allow you to review that video, complete a form stating your notes, send it to the driver, and they can sign off on their phone. And once again, this is why I say it's a safety director's dream. It's creating an automatic system, and it's giving you that documented paper trail that is so important to protect the company in today's culture.
Thank you, Josh, and great job showing this off. I think our CSA tool is just one of the coolest things that our development team has done and put together, and I know a lot of people are really, really enjoying it in the system. So, okay, and then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Josh.
That was Leah. I am have a deep voice today. No problem. I just was going to say, yeah, thank you, Josh. Good job. That was a great job. And I just was going to ask a couple questions too while you were going back to the slide deck about the training. Do we have, I guess they're wondering where they access or schedule those trainings. I don't know if you showed that exactly. If you want to go back and look at that, or you can show it afterwards.
Absolutely. So through the safety management tool itself, you can bulk assign a course to your entire fleet if you have enhanced DQF and you have the training library. And so that's going to allow you to come in here and say, hey, I want to choose a course. Maybe I went through my CSA and saw that my top violation in a certain category was related to space management. I could come in here and send out that specific course or cargo securement, whatever it may be, and choose to send that to my whole fleet. I can also send those courses as part of orientation. So when I'm moving a driver through my hiring cycle and I schedule them for orientation, I can send out in one bulk packet all the forms they need to move forward and the training library that I would want them to complete for orientation. Companies have seen a significant reduction in the cost of their orientation. They're not having to house, travel, lodge, pay for food. Their orientation has been shortened in some cases to half a day because the driver comes ready to go with the training. So that can be scheduled through the process tab. It can be scheduled in bulk through enhanced DQF. You can also move into tools and you may see a course class option if you have our training library, where you can preview those courses yourself.
Okay, thank you. So, you know, we have someone on here saying that they don't know, they're skeptical, and I get it. We've heard this before about their drivers being able to actually go into Pulse and actually do the training completely because, you know, a lot of times they're technologically challenged. What do you say to that?
You know, it's not required that they go through Pulse. This is where a lot of drivers actually do choose to interact because it's so easy. As an app goes, they see a hired view and they only see what you've required them to train on. The other option that I have, though, is the portal itself. If all you scheduled for a driver was orientation, all they will see in here are their onboarding forms and the courses that you've scheduled. Their only option is going to be to choose to select that course, and we've intentionally made it so that there are not a lot of buttons or movement that they have to do to move through. They'll click on the tab, it's going to default to where they left off, and all they do when they've completed the course itself is click next.
Yeah.
The other kind of third span gap I have is that even if you have someone that maybe does really struggle with this, they are able to come into orientation and have this all on their device or on a portal that you could give them a tablet and say, hey, put in your name, social, date of birth, the information's waiting.
Right, and the majority of drivers, because I've heard that complaint, but a lot of, I've also had, you know, just as much feedback from carriers who have said that while they anticipated their drivers would have problems, but they, you know, didn't. They were pleasantly surprised and found that actually drivers are able to do these things a lot more effectively than they were expecting. And like Josh said, you can always walk them through it at orientation if they do come on site, or even over the phone. But for the most part, drivers don't have a problem with doing this kind of training through their phone, at least not to the point that you would think that they would. So
they're very used to being on an app with their ELD these days. Now there are one-off scenarios. I haven't seen an easier user interface for a training portal, and so it's very, very simple to engage with it. And we actually released it to Pulse at will and had a large percentage of drivers on their own try to train. They're seeking content like this.
Yeah, good. I'm actually going to send out while you continue on. I'm going to send out all of the training classes that we have, along with a couple blogs that just to back up and show people how they can get registered with us as, you know, a third party for the Clearinghouse. So I'm going to send you out some information when I send you out that Excel spreadsheet too, so you'll have an additional. Because I know there's just tons of questions, and I really want to get to everybody, but I think that will help out. That will cover a lot of the questions. I do want to ask one about the Clearinghouse, though, that I've seen a couple times on here. If they've ran some queries, but not all queries, is it easy to be able to pick and choose, or, you know, if they don't, or how would you be able to do that? Let me find one of these and I'll ask it more coherently.
You can. So if you're in the safety management tool, if we have a limited query on file, it's going to show that in the tool itself. That third column shows queries that are present. And so right here, you'll see I actually have one on this driver. When I choose to bulk order, instead of select, maybe I choose select all, and then I come through here and remove the ones that I have a query on.
Great. That's easy enough.
And you can also, when you're creating the filter, you'll see that I actually did include ones that currently have one. I could say, if they have one, then no, or then yes, and it would take them out of the list as well.
It's really, really key to have and be able to use those reporting options and see who you need to get, who you don't need to get, and that way you can be compliant for each and every one of these drivers. It's really, really great.
Absolutely. There's not a great way to check it without tools like this.
Agreed. So I'll just jump in. We are at the top of the hour. You guys have been with us for an entire hour, and I just want to cover these last few things really, really quickly. Josh, go ahead and switch to the next slide. This is a perfect time to do sort of corporate maintenance, do an internal DQF audit, look at all the documents and requirements, make sure you've got everything for that driver, review your application, go through your Intella app and actually take it with a test application, make sure it is compliant with federal, state, and local laws that are always changing. And then review your release language that is in connection with your application. If you have not updated your release language in the last couple of years, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your account manager at 10th Street and have them provide you with 10th Street's sample release language and compare that to what you currently have. Now is also a really great time to review and update your handbook. This year has brought interesting challenges with COVID-19 and depending on what state you're in, but most likely just as an employer, it's going to be a best practice to go ahead and have a COVID-19 policy. And then of course, I always recommend that you review, create, and or update any hiring policies or contractor processes that you have. You need to have those things in writing to protect your company.
Okay. Thank you, Shannon. I think we are, as she said at the top of the hour, so, and I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, but I'm going to go ahead and, I want to thank everybody for showing up. And I know you guys are really busy, so I appreciate the time that you took to join us. And thank you, Josh. Thank you, Shannon. We are going to get you, I'm going to get you an email out with everything that I had mentioned before, and want everyone to have a great weekend.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.